The headlines making news in the political world, of course, and joining us again this morning right here in our studio, senior White House correspondent Selina Wang and ABC contributing political correspondent Rachael Bade. Welcome back to you both. So good to see you. So Selina, let's look at the big story this week, the efforts to slim down the government. Obviously, President Trump is rolling along with this. What do we know right now?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in terms of these mass firings could really just be the beginning here. We know that in this first round of layoffs, they're targeting people who were hired by the federal government within the last 1 to 2 years. So this could potentially impact more than 200,000 people. And we are talking about folks in key roles, for instance, in the Department of Health, Energy, and Homeland Security. And we're also told that they're looking at the military next. Now, workers who've been laid off, they tell me that it's not just about losing their jobs and their income, but they're also worried about the people and the communities they serve, whether that's veterans or farmers. Now, we can all agree, most Americans can agree, that the government could be made more efficient. The deep concern here, though, is that it's just not being done in a strategic way.
Definitely concerns there. Thank you, Selina. And Rachael, I want to bring you in because those efforts to pare down the government are running into some legal hurdles. What are your White House sources telling you about how President Trump is reacting?
Yeah, look, in a lot of ways, this was sort of expected, these legal challenges. I mean, given the unprecedented nature of what Donald Trump is doing in gutting entire agencies and laying off mass amounts of federal workers. But look, we all know Donald Trump does not like anyone telling him what he can and cannot do, and that includes Senate-confirmed American judges. I mean, the surprising thing about all of this, to me, at least, is that for the first time, you're seeing people very close with a sitting American president advising and actually cheering him to just ignore the courts and do whatever he wants, and to even impeach judges who are stopping him and sort of tying his hands. Now, look, I've talked to a lot of Hill Republicans. I've talked to a lot of people close with Donald Trump, and everyone, most people, I should say, agree that that's not a good idea, that would be the beginning of the end of American democracy. They're telling him to appeal these rulings, and they think he's going to be victorious in court once it actually gets to the Supreme Court here. But look, we should also make clear that Donald Trump has said he's going to follow the courts, but this is an interesting dynamic we are absolutely keeping an eye on.
And Rachael, this is a huge foreign policy week for President Trump. The hostages released today, the earlier call with Russians Vladimir Putin. What's the strategy here?
Yeah, look, Donald Trump has had a really big victory. We should just say it candidly. That first month in office, releasing about a dozen Americans that had been held in countries across the world, including this morning, an Israeli American being released by Hamas earlier this week, an American teacher that had been held in Russia for several years, bringing him home. But you mentioned strategy shift. And when it comes to foreign policy, a lot of folks have been looking at this sort of whiplash that's going on right now when it comes to U.S. policy toward Ukraine. President Trump talked earlier this week with Ukraine President Vladimir Putin. They agreed that they're going to start negotiating to end the war. Why does this matter? It matters because the terms that the U.S. government is now laying out are very much favorable to Putin himself. This notion that the U.S. is going to take the lead in negotiating rather than Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. There's been some talk about how Ukraine in this administration would not have a path toward joining NATO eventually. That is something that America had supported previously. But we have to say once again that Donald Trump ran on this. He said he was going to do it, and he's following through. So even though this is whiplash, it shouldn't be a surprise.
Like you said, he's following through. And Selina, let's also talk about those reciprocal tariffs President Trump wants to set in motion for every country that taxes U.S. imports. The president says that it's unfair to the relationships with other countries. How would Americans be impacted by this?
Yeah, Janae, so this has the potential to significantly impact prices here in America. So tariffs are essentially taxes that are paid by U.S. companies and importers. They then largely pass on those higher costs to Americans by raising prices. So this plan you're talking about, reciprocal tariffs, means that we would be putting tariffs on other countries at the same rate that they tariff American products. So, for example, India tariffs flowers at 60%. So under this plan, we'd be then putting tariffs on flowers from India at 60% as well. So suddenly, if you're a U.S. importer trying to buy flowers from India, you're paying a much higher price. Now, President Trump's argument is that tariffs make American goods more attractive on the global market, but economists warn that this is going to raise inflation when we're already dealing with an inflation challenge in this country. But to be clear, this is all just a plan right now. Trump hasn't put any concrete details down about how exactly this would work, and we also don't have a timeline on when this could go into effect.
All right, senior White House correspondent Selina Wang, it's nice to have you in studio. Rachael Bade, ABC News contributor, thank you both so much for being with us this morning.